Never thought I'd be the kind of man who spies on his own wife. 52 years of marriage, and I trusted Margaret with everything. Our grandkids, our home, our secrets. But for 3 months, every single night around 11 o'clock, she'd slip out of our bed, walk down that long hallway, and disappear into our son's old room. The room where Daniel used to sleep before he moved out 20 years ago. The room we keep exactly as he left it. She'd stay in there for hours. Sometimes I'd wake at 2 in the morning and her side of the bed would still be cold. When I asked her about it, she'd smile that gentle smile and say she couldn't sleep, that she was just organizing old photo albums. But her hands would tremble when she said it. And that's when I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. What was my wife of half a century hiding from me in that room? I set up a small camera on the bookshelf, hidden behind Daniel's old baseball trophy. I told myself I was protecting her. I told myself I just needed to know she was safe. But deep down, I think I knew I was about to uncover something that would change everything. Before I dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe, because what comes next, you won't believe it. The first night I watched the footage, my hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the laptop. Margaret entered the room at 11:14, wearing her blue nightgown, the one I bought her for our 50th anniversary. She walked slowly, like she was approaching something sacred. She sat on the edge of Daniel's bed, the old mattress creaking under her weight, and she pulled something from the nightstand drawer. A journal. Leather-bound, worn at the edges. I'd never seen it before. She opened it carefully like it might crumble in her hands, and she began to read aloud. Her voice was so soft the camera barely picked it up, but I turned the volume all the way up and pressed my ear close. She was reading to someone, but the room was empty. My name is William, and I've lived a quiet life. I grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania, married my high school sweetheart, raised 2 boys, worked as an insurance adjuster for 38 years. I'm not a man given to panic or wild imagination. But sitting there in the dark, watching my wife read to ghosts, I felt my chest tighten with a fear I couldn't name. The way she touched the pages, the way her lips moved with such tenderness, the way she wiped her eyes every few minutes, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. This wasn't nostalgia. This was grief. Fresh, raw grief. But our son Daniel was alive. I'd spoken to him on the phone just last week. He lived 4 states away with his wife and 2 daughters. He was fine, healthy, busy with work. So why was Margaret sitting in his childhood bedroom every night, crying over a journal I'd never seen, speaking to the empty air like someone was listening? I watched 3 nights of footage in a row. Each night the same ritual. She'd enter at 11, sit on the bed, read from the journal, cry, and then around 1 or 2 in the morning, she'd close the book, kiss her fingers, and press them against the pillow, like she was saying goodnight to someone who wasn't there. On the 4th night, I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted her. I waited until she got up, followed her down the hallway, and when she opened the door to Daniel's room, I stepped in behind her. She gasped, clutching the journal to her chest, her eyes wide with shock and something else. Shame, maybe. Or fear. "Margaret," I said, my voice barely steady. "What's going on? Tell me the truth." She stared at me for a long moment, her face pale in the dim light from the hallway. Then she sat down on the bed, slowly, like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. She opened the journal, her fingers tracing the handwriting on the first page. And she said, "This isn't Daniel's room anymore, William. It never was." I didn't understand. I stood there frozen, my heart pounding in my ears. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, and she whispered, "We had another son. Before Daniel. Before Marcus. His name was Thomas. And we lost him." The air left the room. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Another son? How could I not know? How could she keep this from me for 52 years? She kept talking, her voice breaking. "He was born 3 years before Marcus. He only lived 6 days. They said it was his heart. It just stopped. You were overseas, William. You were stationed in Germany. I was alone. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to say the words out loud. By the time you came home, I'd already buried him. I'd already put him in the ground. And I told myself if I never spoke his name again, maybe the pain would go away. But it never did. I sank down onto the floor, my back against the wall, staring at this woman I thought I knew better than anyone in the world. How many nights had she carried this alone? How many years had she been visiting this room, reading to a baby who never got to grow up, mourning a loss I didn't even know existed? She held the journal out to me, her hands shaking. This is his. I started writing to him the day after he died. I've written to him every week for 53 years. I tell him about our life, about his brothers, about you, about everything he missed. And every night I come in here and I read to him, because I need him to know he wasn't forgotten. I need him to know he mattered. I took the journal from her, the weight of it impossibly heavy in my hands. I opened it to a random page, and the first line I saw made my vision blur. Thomas, today your brother Marcus graduated high school. I wish you could have been there. He looks so much like you. I looked up at Margaret, this woman who'd carried an ocean of grief in silence for half a century, and I didn't know whether to hold her or scream. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. Why didn't you let me mourn him with you? She shook her head, sobbing now, her whole body trembling. Because I thought if I said it out loud, it would destroy you. You were so young. We were so young. And I thought I was protecting you. But I see now, I was just protecting myself. For the first time in our marriage, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. This secret, this hidden life she'd lived parallel to ours. It was like discovering an entire room in a house I thought I knew every corner of. And the worst part? I didn't know if I could forgive her, not for losing our son, but for making me lose him twice. Once when he died, and again every day since, because I never got the chance to know he existed. What would you have done if your own wife kept something like this from you for 50 years? I sat there on the floor of that room, holding a journal written to a ghost, and I realized the woman I married had been living a double life all along, and I had no idea what came next. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in our living room with Thomas's journal open on my lap, reading page after page by the dim light of the floor lamp. Margaret had gone to bed after our confrontation, her face swollen from crying, her body exhausted from finally releasing a secret she'd held for over 5 decades. But I couldn't rest. Every page felt like discovering a son I'd been robbed of knowing. The entries started in 1971, just weeks after I'd returned from Germany. Margaret's handwriting was shaky at first, the ink smudged in places where her tears had fallen. Dear Thomas, she'd written, today would have been your 2-month birthday. I made a small cake and ate it alone in the kitchen while your father was at work. He doesn't know about you yet. I don't know how to tell him. I don't know if I ever will. I'm so sorry, my sweet boy. I'm sorry I'm not brave enough. My chest ached as I read those words. She'd been 23 years old, alone in a new apartment, grieving a baby while pretending everything was fine. While I came home every evening talking about my day, about bills and dinner plans and the future, she'd been drowning in silence. I kept reading. The entries spanned decades. She wrote to Thomas about Marcus being born 2 years later, about how she'd held him in the hospital and whispered an apology because he wasn't her firstborn, even though the world would always think he was. She wrote about Daniel's arrival 4 years after that, about birthday parties and school plays and graduations. She wrote about me, about our fights and our reconciliations, about the time I surprised her with a trip to the coast for our 20th anniversary. She told Thomas everything. He was woven into the fabric of our entire life, invisible to everyone but her. Around 3 in the morning, I found an entry from 1998. Thomas, your brother Marcus got married today. The wedding was beautiful. He married a wonderful woman named Catherine. I stood in the reception and watched him dance with her, and all I could think was that you should have been there. You should have been his best man. You should have given a toast. There should have been 3 sons in our family photos, not 2. I'm tired of pretending, Thomas. I'm tired of carrying you alone. But I don't know how to stop. I closed the journal and pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to break me apart. Anger, grief, confusion, love. They all twisted together until I couldn't tell one from the other. How do you mourn someone you never knew existed? How do you grieve for 53 years of lost fatherhood? When the sun finally rose, I walked into our bedroom. Margaret was awake, sitting up against the headboard, her hands folded in her lap. She looked smaller somehow, like confessing had physically diminished her. "We need to talk," I said quietly. She nodded, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. I sat on the edge of the bed, the journal still in my hands. "I read it," I said. "All of it. Not every page, but enough. Enough to understand what you've been living with." Her lips trembled. "I'm sorry, William. I know sorry isn't enough, but I don't have anything else to give you." I looked at her, this woman I'd built a life with, and I realized I was looking at someone who'd been building 2 lives simultaneously. One with me, and one with a ghost. "I need to know why," I said. "Not why you didn't tell me when it happened, I understand that part. You were young and scared and alone. But why didn't you tell me later? After Marcus was born? After 10 years? After 20? Why did you let me go half a century without knowing I had another son?" She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Because the longer I waited, the harder it became. After a year, I thought, how do I tell him now? After 5 years, it felt impossible. After 10, it felt like a betrayal. And after 20, 30, 40 years, I convinced myself it was kinder to let you live without that pain. I thought I was protecting you, William. But really, I was just a coward. "Do you know what hurts the most?" I asked, my voice breaking. "It's not that he died. Death happens. Hearts fail. I understand that. What hurts is that you didn't think I was strong enough to carry it with you. You didn't trust me enough to let me be your partner in grief. You made that choice for both of us, and I can't get those years back. I can't go back and mourn him when it mattered. I can't go visit his grave because I don't even know where he's buried." She let out a broken sob. "He's in Riverside Cemetery. Section C, Plot 147. I visit him every month. I bring flowers. I talk to him. I've been doing it for 53 years. If you're still with me, you won't believe what happens next. Drop a comment below with your country so I know you're here." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Every month, for 53 years. All those times she'd said she was running errands or visiting a friend, she'd been visiting our son's grave. Our son I didn't know we had. "I need to see it," I said. "Today. Now." She nodded slowly. "Okay." We drove in silence to Riverside Cemetery, a place I'd passed 100 times but never entered. Margaret led me through rows of headstones, her steps sure and practiced, until we reached a small granite marker under an oak tree. The inscription was simple. Thomas Allen Morrison. Born March 14th, 1971. Died March 20th, 1971. Beloved son. Forever in our hearts. I dropped to my knees in front of it, my hands pressing into the cold grass. This was real. He was real. My son had existed, had breathed, had lived for 6 days, and I'd never known. Margaret knelt beside me, her hand hovering near my shoulder but not quite touching. "I come here on the 20th of every month," she whispered. "The day he died. I tell him about our family. I tell him he's loved. I tell him I'm sorry." I looked at the dates on the stone, doing the math in my head. "He would be 53 now," I said. "Older than Marcus, older than Daniel. He'd probably have kids of his own. Grandkids, maybe. We'd have a whole other branch of family we've never met. She nodded, fresh tears falling. I think about that all the time. I sat there for over an hour, just staring at that stone, trying to reconcile the life I thought I'd lived with the truth. Finally, I stood up, brushing the dirt from my knees. I need time, I told Margaret. I need time to process this. I don't know how I feel right now. I don't know if I'm angry or sad or both, but I need space. Her face crumpled, but she nodded. I understand. We drove home separately. She went to her sister's house for a few days. I stayed in our home, surrounded by 52 years of memories that suddenly felt incomplete. That night I went into Daniel's old room, the room that Margaret had transformed into a shrine for Thomas. I sat on the bed where she'd sat hundreds of times, and I opened the journal again. This time, I started from the beginning. And as I read, I began to understand something I hadn't before. This wasn't just about a secret. It was about survival. Margaret had created a way to keep Thomas alive because letting him disappear completely would have destroyed her. The journal wasn't a betrayal. It was a lifeline. But that didn't make the pain any easier. Because while she'd been surviving, I'd been living half a life, missing a piece I never knew was gone. Do you think she was wrong to keep this from me? Or was she doing the best she could with an impossible situation? I sat in that room until dawn, reading about a son I'd never held, and wondering if forgiveness was even possible when the wound was this deep. 3 days passed before Margaret came home. 3 days of me living in that room, sleeping on Daniel's old bed, reading Thomas's journal over and over until I'd memorized entire passages. I'd stopped eating regularly. I'd stopped answering the phone when Marcus or Daniel called. I existed in a strange fog, suspended between the life I thought I'd lived and the truth that had shattered it. When Margaret finally walked through the front door, she looked older. The weight of confession had aged her in ways I'd never noticed before. She set her bag down in the hallway and stood there, waiting, her hands clasped in front of her like a defendant awaiting a verdict. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and the journal open to a page from 1983. She'd written about Thomas missing Marcus's 10th birthday party, about wondering what kind of uncle he would have been. We need to tell them, I said without looking up. Marcus and Daniel. They need to know they had a brother. Margaret's face went pale. She pulled out a chair and sat down slowly, her movements careful, like she was afraid any sudden gesture might break what was left of us. William, I don't know if that's a good idea, she said quietly. They've lived their whole lives not knowing. Why burden them now? I finally looked at her, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Because they have a right to know where they come from. They have a right to know their family history. And because I'm tired of secrets, Margaret. I'm tired of living in a house built on things we don't say. She flinched at the hardness in my voice. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But Marcus and Daniel, they're in their 40s now. They have their own families, their own lives. This will hurt them. Good, I said, and I heard the bitterness in my own words. Let them hurt. Let them feel a fraction of what I've felt these past 3 days. Let them understand what it's like to discover your entire childhood was missing a piece and nobody thought you deserved to know. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. You're punishing me. Maybe I am, I admitted. Or maybe I'm just trying to make sense of a family that was never what I thought it was. Maybe I need our sons to know the truth because I can't carry this alone anymore. You carried it alone for 53 years. Now it's my turn, and I'm not strong enough. That afternoon, we called Marcus first. He lived 2 hours away in Pittsburgh with Catherine and their teenage son. When he answered, his voice was cheerful, unsuspecting. Hey, Dad, what's up? Everything okay? Your mother and I need to talk to you, I said. Can you come to the house this weekend? It's important. There was a pause. Is someone sick? Are you guys all right? We're fine, Margaret interjected, her voice shaky. We just need to talk to you and your brother together. It's about family. We made the same call to Daniel in Ohio. Both sons agreed to come home that Saturday, though I could hear the concern in their voices. They knew something was wrong. They just had no idea how wrong. The days leading up to Saturday felt like waiting for an execution. Margaret barely spoke to me. She moved through the house like a ghost, cooking meals I didn't eat, organizing things that didn't need organizing. At night, I'd hear her crying softly in the guest room where she'd been sleeping. Part of me wanted to go to her, to hold her, to tell her we'd survive this. But a larger part of me was still too angry, too betrayed, too raw. On Friday night, I found her in Thomas's room again, sitting on the bed with the journal closed in her lap. I stood in the doorway watching her. After tomorrow, this won't be just our secret anymore, I said. She nodded without looking at me. I know. Are you ready for that? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I've never been ready for any of this, William. Not when Thomas died. Not when I decided to keep him secret. Not when you found out. I've just been surviving, one day at a time. And now our sons are going to have to survive it too. I walked into the room and sat beside her on the bed, the first time we'd been this close since the night I confronted her. Do you regret it? I asked. Keeping him secret all these years? She looked down at the journal, her fingers tracing the worn leather cover. Every single day, she whispered. But I didn't know how to undo it. Once you start hiding something, it becomes part of you. It becomes the foundation everything else is built on. And I was terrified that if I pulled it out, everything would collapse. I think it's collapsing anyway, I said. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. Saturday arrived too quickly. Marcus showed up first, his face etched with worry. Catherine was with him, and their son had stayed home. Daniel arrived 30 minutes later with his wife Jennifer, both of them looking concerned and confused. We all gathered in the living room, the same room where we'd celebrated countless Christmases and birthdays, where we'd watched our grandchildren take their first steps, where we'd built a family on what I now understood was an incomplete foundation. Marcus spoke first. Okay, you're scaring us. What's going on? Are you getting divorced? Is someone dying? What is this about? I looked at Margaret, giving her the chance to speak first. This was her secret, her story to tell. But she just sat there, frozen, her hands trembling in her lap. So I did it. I told them. I told them about Thomas, about the 6 days he lived, about the journal their mother had kept for 53 years, about the monthly visits to a grave they'd never seen, about the brother they'd never known existed. The room fell into a silence so complete I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen. Marcus stared at us like we'd spoken a language he didn't understand. Daniel's face had gone completely white. Catherine and Jennifer exchanged shocked glances. Finally, Marcus found his voice. What do you mean we had another brother? His tone wasn't angry yet, just bewildered, like he was trying to solve an impossible equation. Your mother had a son before you were born, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos I felt inside. He died when he was 6 days old. She never told me. She never told anyone. And she's been grieving him alone for over 5 decades. Daniel stood up abruptly, his hands shaking. How is that even possible? How do you hide an entire child? How do you just never mention it? Mom, how could you do that? Margaret finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I was 23 years old. Your father was overseas. The baby died and I buried him, and I just couldn't say the words out loud. And then time passed and it got harder and harder and I didn't know how to. Her voice broke completely. I didn't know how to tell you I'd been lying by omission for your entire lives. Marcus turned to me, his eyes blazing. And you just found out? How? I set up a camera, I admitted, shame coloring my words. Your mother was going into Daniel's old room every night. I needed to know why. That's when I discovered the journal. So you've been spying on each other, Daniel said, his voice rising. This whole family is built on lies and surveillance and secrets. What else don't we know? What else are you hiding? Nothing, Margaret said desperately. There's nothing else, I swear. This was the only thing, the only secret. You have to believe me. How can we believe anything now? Marcus demanded. Our whole childhood, every family dinner, every holiday, every moment we thought we knew who we were, it was all fake. We had a brother, and you erased him. You erased him like he never existed. He did exist, Margaret cried out, standing now, her face streaked with tears. He existed, and I loved him, and I've carried him every single day of my life. I didn't erase him. I kept him alive the only way I knew how. Then you should have let us keep him alive too, Daniel said coldly. But you didn't give us that choice. You didn't give Dad that choice. You made yourself the center of this grief and left the rest of us out in the cold. The words hung in the air like poison. Marcus grabbed his jacket. We need to leave. Catherine, we're going. Daniel, I think we should go too, Jennifer said quietly, touching his arm. Both of our sons walked toward the door. Before they left, Marcus turned back one last time. I don't know if I can forgive this, Mom. I don't know if I even want to try. The door closed behind them, and the house fell silent except for Margaret's broken sobs. I sat there watching my wife fall apart, watching our family splinter in real time, and I realized something terrible. In trying to protect everyone from pain, Margaret had guaranteed we'd all eventually drown in it. And I didn't know if any of us would find our way back to shore. 2 weeks passed with no word from Marcus or Daniel. No phone calls, no text messages, nothing but silence that grew heavier with each passing day. Margaret stopped sleeping entirely. I'd wake at 3 in the morning to find her sitting in Thomas's room, holding the journal, staring at the photographs spread across the bed like tarot cards revealing an unchangeable future. She'd lost weight, her clothes hanging loose on her frame, her eyes hollow and red-rimmed. One morning I found her in the kitchen, phone in her hand, her thumb hovering over Marcus's number. Don't, I said gently. Give them space. They'll come around when they're ready. What if they never are? She whispered. What if I've lost all 3 of my sons now? 1 to death and 2 to my own cowardice. I didn't have an answer for her. The truth was I didn't know if our family could survive this. I'd spent the past 2 weeks oscillating between anger at Margaret for keeping the secret and anger at myself for not somehow knowing, for not seeing the signs, for being so absorbed in my own life that I missed the grief my wife carried every single day. On the 16th day, my phone rang. It was Marcus. Dad, can you meet me somewhere, just you? Not Mom. Not yet. I'm not ready for that. We agreed to meet at a diner halfway between our houses, a neutral territory neither of us had memories attached to. When I arrived, Marcus was already in a booth by the window, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't been sleeping any better than his mother. I slid into the seat across from him, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. I've been thinking about nothing else for 2 weeks. I've barely been able to focus at work. Catherine says I've been distant with her and our son. I keep looking at my own kid and wondering what it would be like to lose him. And then I get angry all over again because Mom lost Thomas, and somehow that made her think it was okay to lie to all of us for 53 years. I understand, I said carefully. He shook his head. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're just as much a victim in this as Daniel and I are. She lied to you too. She took away your right to grieve your own son. At least we never knew him. You could have. You should have. The weight of that truth settled over me. He was right. I'd lost something different than they had, something perhaps even more precious. The chance to hold my firstborn son while he was alive. The chance to whisper to him, to tell him I loved him, to be there when he took his last breath. Margaret had stolen that from me, even if she'd done it out of misguided protection. But she's still your mother, I said quietly. And she's been punishing herself for this decision every day for over half a century. I'm not excusing what she did. I'm just asking you to consider the whole picture. Marcus finally took a sip of his coffee, grimacing when he realized it had gone cold. I talked to Daniel yesterday. First time we've really spoken since we found out. He's angrier than I am, if that's possible. He feels like his whole identity is a lie. He keeps saying he's the youngest of 3, not the youngest of 2. And that changes everything about how he sees himself. Does it? I asked. Does knowing about Thomas actually change who you are? Or does it just add context to where you came from? He looked at me sharply. That's exactly the kind of thing Mom would say. Trying to minimize it, trying to make it seem smaller than it is. I'm not minimizing it, I said firmly. I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to figure out how to move forward because going backward isn't an option. Thomas existed. He died. Your mother kept it secret. Those are facts we can't change. The only thing we can control now is what we do next. Marcus leaned back against the booth, his eyes wet. I want to hate her. Part of me does hate her. But she's my mom. She's the woman who sat with me every night when I had nightmares as a kid. She's the one who taught me how to tie my shoes and drove me to baseball practice and cried at my wedding. How do I reconcile that person with someone who could keep something this massive hidden? People are complicated, I said. Your mother is both the woman who loved you fiercely and the woman who made a terrible choice out of fear. She can be both things at once. We sat in silence for a while, watching the rain start up again outside, drops racing each other down the window. Do you forgive her? Marcus asked suddenly. I thought about it, really thought about it. Did I forgive Margaret? Could I? I'm working on it, I said honestly. Some days I wake up and I understand why she did what she did. Other days I'm so angry I can barely look at her. But I'm trying because the alternative is losing her completely, and I'm not ready for that. Even after everything, I'm not ready to walk away from 52 years of marriage. Marcus nodded slowly. I want to meet him. Thomas. I want to see his grave. I can arrange that, I said. Your mother goes every month on the 20th. That's in 4 days. Maybe we could all go together. I don't know about all together, Marcus said carefully, but maybe you and me first. Then maybe I can work my way up to seeing Mom. It was progress. Small, fragile progress, but progress nonetheless. 4 days later, on a gray Thursday morning, Marcus and I drove to Riverside Cemetery together. Margaret had wanted to come, had begged actually, but I'd convinced her to wait. Our sons needed to process this in their own time, in their own way. We walked through the rows of headstones until we reached the small granite marker under the oak tree. Marcus stood there for a long time, just staring at the simple inscription. Thomas Allen Morrison. Born March 14, 1971. Died March 20, 1971. Beloved son. Forever in our hearts. He would have been 53, Marcus said quietly. Older than me by 2 years. I would have been the middle child, not the oldest. My whole life would have been different. Maybe, I said. Or maybe it would have been exactly the same, just with one more person in the family photos. Marcus knelt down, touching the stone gently. Mom's been coming here alone all these years, every month. That's over 600 visits. 600 times she came here and cried and talked to a baby who never got to grow up, and she did it all by herself because she was too afraid to let anyone help her carry it. The pain in his voice was raw and real. I knelt beside him. Your mother made a mistake, I said. A huge one. But I think she's paid for it every single day since. The question is whether we're going to make her keep paying for the rest of her life, or whether we're going to find a way to forgive her and move forward together. Marcus wiped his eyes. I don't know if I can forget this. I'm not asking you to forget, I said. I'm asking you to try to forgive. There's a difference. We stayed at the grave for over an hour. Marcus asked questions about what I'd learned from the journal, about the details of Thomas's short life, about the funeral Margaret had attended alone. I answered everything as best I could, filling in the gaps of a history we'd both been excluded from. When we finally stood to leave, Marcus took one of the flowers from the arrangement Margaret had left during her last visit. He held it carefully, like it was precious. "Tell Mom I came," he said. "Tell her I'm still angry, and I'm still hurt, but I'm trying. I will. I promised." On the drive home, my phone rang. It was Daniel. "Where are you?" he asked, his voice tight. "I'm with your brother. We just left Riverside Cemetery." There was a long pause. "I want to come too. Tomorrow. Just me and you, like Marcus got. No Mom yet." "Tomorrow," I agreed. The next day, I made the same drive with Daniel. He was quieter than Marcus had been, his jaw clenched, his hands fisted on his knees. When we reached Thomas's grave, he stood at a distance at first, like he was afraid to get too close. "This is real," he finally said. I kept thinking maybe it was some kind of mistake, some misunderstanding. But it's real. There's a grave. There was a baby. We had a brother. "Yes," I said simply. Daniel moved closer, reading the dates over and over. 6 days. He only lived 6 days. And Mom has been coming here for 53 years. That's longer than I've been alive. That's longer than Marcus has been alive. She's been living this parallel life we knew nothing about. He turned to me, and I saw fear in his eyes. "What else don't we know, Dad? What other secrets are buried in this family?" "This is it," I said firmly. "I've read every page of that journal. There are no other secrets. This was the only thing your mother kept hidden, and it nearly destroyed her." "I believe that," he said. "But it doesn't make it hurt less." "I know, son." We stood there together, 3 generations of Morrison men connected by grief. Me grieving the son I never knew. Marcus and Daniel grieving the brother they never met. And somewhere in the distance, Margaret grieving alone like she'd done for over 5 decades. Before we left, Daniel did something that surprised me. He pulled out his phone and took a picture of the headstone. "I want to remember," he said quietly. "I want to remember that he was real, that he mattered, that he was part of us." When I got home that evening, Margaret was waiting by the door, her face anxious and hopeful. "Both boys went to see him," I told her. "Separately. They're still processing, they're still hurt. But they're trying, Margaret. They're trying to understand." She collapsed against me, sobbing with relief and residual fear. "Do you think they'll ever forgive me?" I held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, feeling the fragility of her bones under my hands. "I think so. But it's going to take time. And you're going to have to be patient." "I can do that," she whispered. "I can wait. I've gotten very good at waiting." That night I found her in Thomas's room again, but this time she wasn't alone with her grief. I sat beside her on the bed, and together we read passages from the journal. She told me stories about the 6 days Thomas lived, details she'd never written down. How he'd gripped her finger with his tiny hand, how he'd made small sounds that weren't quite cries, how in those brief moments she'd felt completely complete, like her whole purpose in life had been to bring this small person into the world. And then she told me about the moment he died, how his heart had simply stopped, how she'd held him for hours afterward, unwilling to let go, how the nurses had finally, gently taken him from her arms. "I should have called you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You were overseas, but I should have found a way to reach you. You should have been there. You had a right to be there." "Yes," I said, "I should have been there. But I wasn't, and we can't change that. All we can do is move forward." She looked at me, really looked at me, searching my face. "Can you forgive me, William? Can you really forgive me for taking that away from you?" I took her hand, feeling the decades of life we'd lived together in the worn softness of her skin, the familiar shape of her fingers. I'm trying, Margaret. Some days are harder than others. But I'm trying because I love you. I've loved you for 52 years and I don't know how to stop just because you made a terrible mistake. Even a mistake this big. She leaned her head against my shoulder and we sat there in our dead son's room, two old people trying to find their way back to each other through a minefield of grief and betrayal and love that somehow, impossibly, still endured. Outside, the rain had stopped. Through the window, I could see the first stars beginning to appear in the clearing sky, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something that might eventually become hope. Spring came slowly that year, like the world itself was being cautious about new beginnings. It had been 3 months since Marcus and Daniel learned about Thomas, 3 months of careful phone calls and tentative conversations, 3 months of our family learning how to exist in this new reality, where the past had been rewritten and the future was uncertain. Margaret marked each day in a small notebook she kept by her bed, counting down to moments she hoped would come. The first time Marcus called her directly. The first time Daniel agreed to have coffee with just her. The first time either of them said they loved her without the words sounding like an accusation. Some of those moments had come. Others were still waiting. On a Tuesday morning in late April, I found Margaret standing in Thomas's room with 3 cardboard boxes at her feet. She was taking down the curtains, the ones that had hung there since Daniel moved out 20 years ago. "What are you doing?" I asked from the doorway. She turned to me, and I saw something in her face I hadn't seen in months. Determination. "It's time," she said simply. Time for what? Time to stop living in a shrine. Time to let this room be something other than a monument to my guilt. She gestured around the space, at the bed that hadn't been slept in, the shelves filled with books no one read, the desk where she'd sat hundreds of nights writing in that journal. Thomas deserves better than this. He deserves to be remembered as part of our family, not hidden away in a room nobody enters. He deserves to be integrated into our lives, not separated from them. I stepped into the room, looking around with new eyes. "What did you have in mind?" She took a deep breath. "I want to create a family memory room. Not just for Thomas, but for all of us. Photos from every stage of our lives, Marcus and Daniel's childhood things, your father's war medals, my mother's quilts, and yes, Thomas's things too. The journal, the photographs, the blanket he was wrapped in. But all of it together, showing the whole story of this family. The good parts and the painful parts, the truth. It was a good idea. Maybe even a healing one. "I'll help you," I said. We spent the next week transforming the room. We painted the walls a warm cream color, instead of the faded blue they'd be. We brought in bookshelves and filled them with photo albums, not hidden away but displayed openly. We framed some of the pictures from Thomas's short life and hung them alongside photos of Marcus's first day of school, Daniel's wedding, our grandchildren's births. We created a timeline of our family on one wall, and for the first time, it was complete. Thomas's birth and death were marked there, integrated into the story instead of erased from it. Margaret's hands shook when she pinned those dates to the wall, but she did it. On a Saturday afternoon, we invited Marcus and Daniel to come see what we'd done. They arrived separately, still not quite ready to process this together. Marcus came first with Catherine and their son Tyler. Tyler was 16 now, old enough to understand what he was about to learn. Marcus had asked our permission to tell him about Thomas, and we'd said yes. Our grandson deserved to know his family's full history. Tyler walked into the memory room and stopped, his eyes scanning the walls, taking in the photographs and timeline. He found Thomas's picture quickly, the one where Margaret held him in the hospital. "That's him?" Tyler asked quietly. "That's my uncle who died?" "Yes," Margaret said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "That's Thomas. Your grandfather's and my firstborn son. Your father's oldest brother." Tyler studied the photo for a long time. "He looks like Dad. Like he would have looked like Dad if he'd grown up." "He does, doesn't he?" Margaret said, a sad smile crossing her face. Marcus stood beside his son, his hand on Tyler's shoulder. "We should have known about him sooner," Marcus said, but there was less anger in his voice than there had been months ago. "We should have grown up knowing we had a brother who came before us. But at least we know now. At least he's not hidden anymore." Tyler turned to Margaret. "Do you still visit his grave, Grandma?" "Every month," she said. "On the 20th, the day he died." "Can I come with you sometime?" Tyler asked. "I'd like to meet him. I mean, I know he's not really there, but I'd like to see where he's buried. I'd like to tell him about our family, about how he's part of us now." Margaret's face crumpled, and she pulled Tyler into a hug. "Of course you can come. I would love that." Daniel arrived an hour later with his wife Jennifer and their two daughters, Sophia and Emma, ages 12 and 9. We went through the same process, showing them the room, explaining the timeline, introducing them to an uncle they'd never known existed. Sophia, the older girl, was quiet and thoughtful as she examined everything. Emma, still young enough to ask questions without filter, wanted to know everything. "Why did his heart stop working?" she asked. "Sometimes babies are born with hearts that don't work properly," Margaret explained gently. "The doctors tried to help him, but they couldn't fix it. And medicine wasn't as good back then as it is now." "Did you cry a lot?" Emma asked. "Yes, sweetheart. I cried more than I've ever cried in my life." "Do you still cry about him?" "Sometimes. But now when I cry, it's not just sad tears. Sometimes they're grateful tears because I had him for 6 days, and those 6 days mattered. And sometimes they're happy tears, because now I get to share him with all of you, instead of keeping him to myself." Emma thought about this seriously. "I think he would have been a good uncle. I think he would have played with us." "I think so too," Margaret said, her voice breaking. After the girls had explored the room thoroughly, Daniel pulled me aside into the hallway. "This was a good idea," he said quietly. "The room, making it about all of us instead of just him. It makes it feel less like a secret and more like just a sad part of our family history." "That's what we were hoping for," I said. "Your mother needed to stop hiding him away. We all did." Daniel looked back toward the room where Margaret was showing Sophia the journal, letting her read a few entries. "I'm still angry," he admitted. "I don't know if that anger is ever going to completely go away. But I'm trying to understand why she did what she did. And I'm trying to remember that she's human. That she was young and scared and made a choice that seemed right at the time, even if it wasn't. That's all any of us can do," I said. That evening, after everyone had left, Margaret and I sat in the memory room together. The late afternoon sun came through the window, casting golden light across the photographs and timeline, illuminating our family's history in all its complicated beauty. "Do you think they'll truly forgive me?" Margaret asked, the question she'd asked dozens of times over the past months. "I think they already have," I said. "Maybe not completely, maybe not in a way that erases all the hurt. But enough. Enough to move forward. Enough to rebuild." She leaned against me, and I put my arm around her. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not leaving. For not giving up on me. On us. When you had every right to. For helping me find a way to make this right. Or as right as it can be." I kissed the top of her head. "We've been married 52 years, Margaret. I'm not giving up now just because things got hard. That's not what marriage means." We sat in silence for a while, surrounded by the evidence of our life together. The good moments and the painful ones, the births and the deaths, the joy and the grief, all woven together into something messy and complicated and real. A week later, on the 20th of the month, we all went to Riverside Cemetery together. All of us. Me and Margaret, Marcus and Catherine and Tyler, Daniel and Jennifer and Sophia and Emma. 3 generations of the Morrison family coming to visit the family member we'd lost before most of us had been born. Margaret brought flowers like she always did, but this time she wasn't alone. Tyler and Sophia helped her arrange them in the vase at the base of the headstone. Emma asked if she could leave one of her drawings, a picture she'd made of a family tree with Thomas's name included at the top. Of course, my love, Margaret said, carefully tucking the drawing under a rock so it wouldn't blow away. Marcus stood with his arm around Catherine, staring at his brother's name carved in stone. I wish I'd known him, he said. I wish I'd gotten to be his little brother while he was alive. Me too, Daniel added quietly. Me too. But we know him now, I said. Maybe not the way we would have wanted to, but we know he existed. We know he was loved. We know he mattered. And that counts for something. We stood there together, all of us, as the spring wind moved through the oak tree's branches above Thomas's grave. And for the first time since this all began, it felt like our family was whole. Not undamaged, not without scars, but whole. On the drive home, Margaret reached over and took my hand. I've been thinking, she said. About what? About the journal. I've been writing in it for 53 years. Maybe it's time to stop. I looked at her, surprised. You don't have to stop if it helps you. But I think it has helped me all it can, she said thoughtfully. I started writing to Thomas because I needed a place to put all the things I couldn't say out loud. But now I can say them. Now I can talk about him with you, with our sons, with our grandchildren. I don't need the journal to keep him alive anymore. He's alive in all of us now. What will you do with it? I asked. I thought maybe we could keep it in the memory room, she said. Let Marcus and Daniel read it if they want to. Let our grandchildren read it when they're old enough. Let it be part of our family's history instead of my private grief. That sounds right, I said. That night, Margaret placed the journal on a shelf in the memory room, between a photo album from our wedding and a scrapbook from Marcus's childhood. She ran her fingers over the worn leather cover one last time, then stepped back. Goodbye, Thomas, she whispered. Thank you for letting me hold on to you for so long, but I think it's time I held on to the family I still have instead. We turned off the light and closed the door, but we didn't lock it. The room wasn't a secret anymore. It was just another room in our house filled with memories both joyful and sad, a testament to a family that had learned the hard way that love and loss are often inseparable. Over the following months, things slowly returned to a new kind of normal. Marcus and Daniel started calling more regularly. Sunday dinners resumed, though they were quieter at first, everyone still learning how to be together in this new configuration. The grandchildren asked questions about Thomas sometimes, curious about the uncle they'd never met, and we answered honestly. We told them about his 6 days of life. We told them about the grief that had shaped their grandmother. We told them that families are complicated, that people make mistakes, and that forgiveness is possible even when the wounds run deep. One Sunday, about 6 months after everything had come to light, we were all gathered in our backyard for a barbecue. Marcus was manning the grill. Daniel was playing catch with Tyler. The girls were helping Margaret set the table. Jennifer and Catherine were laughing about something in the kitchen. I stood on the porch, watching all of them, and I felt something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe. Or acceptance. Or just the quiet knowledge that we'd survived something that could have destroyed us. Marcus looked up from the grill and caught my eye. He smiled, a real smile, and mouthed the words, "We're okay." I nodded. We were okay. Not perfect, not undamaged, but okay. Margaret came to stand beside me, slipping her hand into mine. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I'm thinking about how we almost lost this," I said. "How one secret almost took away all these Sunday afternoons, all these moments of our sons and grandchildren together. How close we came to letting the past destroy the present." "But we didn't," she said softly. "We almost did. But we didn't." "No," I agreed. "We didn't." She rested her head on my shoulder. "I'm sorry, William. For all of it. For the years you lost with Thomas. For the pain I caused you and our sons. For carrying something alone that should have been ours to carry together." "I know," I said. "And I forgive you. I really truly forgive you." She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. "Even after everything?" "Even after everything. I confirmed. Because that's what love is, Margaret. It's choosing to stay even when leaving would be easier. It's choosing to forgive even when the hurt runs deep. It's choosing each other, over and over again, through all the mess and mistakes and pain. She kissed me then, soft and sweet. A kiss that tasted like gratitude and relief and 52 years of shared history. When we pulled apart, Emma was calling for us to come eat. As we walked toward the table where our family waited, Margaret paused and looked back at the house at the window of the memory room on the second floor. "Thank you, Thomas," she whispered, "for teaching me that secrets destroy what silence was supposed to protect, for showing me that the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than a lie, for reminding me that love isn't about perfection, it's about showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." We sat down to dinner surrounded by laughter and conversation, surrounded by the family we'd almost lost and then found again. And as the sun set over our backyard, painting everything in shades of gold and amber, I realized something important. Thomas had died 53 years ago, but his impact on our family was still unfolding. Not as a tragedy that defined us, but as a reminder that every member of a family matters, even the ones we lose too soon. That grief doesn't have an expiration date, that secrets have a cost, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is tell the truth, face the consequences, and trust that love is strong enough to survive the impact. Before I continue, you need to subscribe because what I'm about to share will move you. Hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss stories like this. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I found Margaret in the memory room one last time. She was standing in front of Thomas's photograph, the one where she held him in the hospital. "I thought you were done coming in here alone," I said gently. "I am," she replied. "I just wanted to say goodnight." I moved to stand beside her, and together we looked at the image of our firstborn son, the child who'd lived 6 days and changed everything. "Good night, Thomas," I said quietly, speaking to him for what felt like the first time. "Thank you for bringing our family back together. Thank you for teaching us that it's never too late to tell the truth. Thank you for being our son, even if we only got to keep you for a little while." Margaret squeezed my hand and we turned off the light together. As we walked down the hallway toward our bedroom, I thought about the moral of our story, the lesson I'd learned through months of pain and anger and eventual forgiveness. Secrets, no matter how well-intentioned, are like cracks in a foundation. They might stay hidden for years, even decades, but eventually they'll spread. And when they do, they'll threaten everything built on top of them. The only way to prevent total collapse is to expose them, address them, and rebuild with honesty as your cornerstone. It's painful, it's messy, it requires more courage than keeping silent, but it's the only way to build something that will truly last. Margaret had learned this lesson at tremendous cost. Our sons had learned it through pain and betrayal, and I had learned it by discovering that the woman I thought I knew completely had been a stranger in the most important way. But we'd survived. More than survived, we'd found our way back to each other. And that night, as I held my wife of 52 years in our bed, listening to her breathing slowly even out as she fell asleep, I felt grateful. Not for the pain we'd endured, but for the fact that our love had proven strong enough to endure it. I am reading and replying to every comment under this post. Tell me, have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything you thought you knew? How did you handle it? Did you find forgiveness, or are you still searching for it? Share your story below. You're not alone in this. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about your own family and the secrets we all carry, please subscribe. Because every family has a story. Every family has hidden chapters, and sometimes the bravest thing we can do is bring them into the light. The last thing I did before falling asleep was think about Thomas. Not with grief this time, but with a quiet sense of peace. He'd lived 6 days 53 years ago, but his presence in our lives was permanent now. Not as a secret or a source of shame, but as a reminder that every person matters, that every life, no matter how brief, leaves ripples that extend far beyond what we can see, and that the measure of a family isn't whether they avoid pain, but whether they find the courage to face it together. Good night, Thomas, I thought one more time. You're home now. You're finally home with all of us, and we'll never let you be forgotten again.